So, before we go too far, we have to grapple with, where did the great fish drop Jonah off? While the common sentiment is that the fish brought him to Nineveh, take a look at this map. Nineveh is landlocked completely. The Tigris River flows into Nineveh, but there's no way to get to the Tigris River from Israel. There's no Suez Canal yet, so you can't go around the Arabian Peninsula. Again, there are details that the Book of Jonah is really concerned with sharing, and there are details that it really doesn't bother with, like what kind of fish was it that swallowed Jonah, and where did the fish take him? Best guess, the ship took him away from Israel, and the fish brought him back close to where he started in Joppa. The word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Go at once to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim to it what I tell you. Jonah went at once to Nineveh in accordance with the Lord's command. The Lord tells Jonah to go at once to Nineveh, the same exact command as we saw in the first verse of the book. The fish didn't bring him to Nineveh. It couldn't have. It brought him back so that he'd have to make the same journey that he would have had to make at the very beginning of the story. He was told to go to Nineveh. He tried to get out of it, and now he's right back where he started, except now he also smells like the inside of a fish. So what does Jonah do this time? He goes at once to Nineveh in accordance with the Lord's command. Wow. Sounds like he learned his lesson, huh? The last time the word of the Lord came to him, he tried to head off to Tarshish, but now he's on the straight and narrow. Or at least he looks like he is. For now. Nineveh was an enormously large city, a 3 days walk across. Jonah started out and made his way into the city the distance of 1 day's walk and proclaimed, 40 days more, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. So, the designation that Nineveh was so big that it would take a person 3 days to cross it is almost certainly not literal. As I've mentioned before, the designation of a 3-day journey in the Bible is a colloquial way of saying a long way. To say that a city is a 3-day journey across is a way of saying that it's a big city. And it was. Archaeologists tell us that it was the second largest city in the ancient Near East. But in no way would it take him more than an hour or two to cross. In the ancient world, a day's journey was roughly equivalent to 20 miles. There was no city, ancient or modern, that was or is 60 miles in diameter. Some ancient rabbis noted this astounding figure attached to the size of the city. They wondered if the Book of Jonah was talking about the circumference rather than the diameter. It's an interesting thought, but we think not. Earlier in the course, I said that as of the writing of the Book of Jonah, Nineveh was long gone. So it had a bit of a legendary feel to it. I think the more probable answer here is that it was such a legendary place that people made it bigger and bigger when they spoke of it. Sort of like what happens to the size of the fish you caught, the more you tell the story of the catch. But the text says it's a 3-day walk across, and then the text tells us that Jonah walked 1 day into the city to begin his prophesizing. Now, some commentators over the years have suggested that Perhaps what is going on here is that Jonah is so excited to begin his prophetic ministry that he just can't wait another half day to get into the center of the city. That's interesting, of course, but here's the question. Does that sound like the Jonah that we've come to know from this book? The other possibility that commentators point to that I think is far the more probable possibility is that this is one more way that Jonah is showing his disobedience. This time, though, he's not completely disobeying God. He's just limiting himself to doing literally exactly what God has asked of him. God told him to go to Nineveh, and he did. Just not to the center of it. Then, right there, still on the outskirts of the town, Jonah utters his prophecy. 40 days more, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. Before we get to the substance, or lack thereof, of this particular prophecy, I want to note that in Hebrew, this prophecy is 5 words. 5 words. Is the picture of Jonah becoming clearer? This whole journey. And Jonah says 5 words to the people in the suburbs of Nineveh. Again, I think a picture is emerging of a Jonah who is no longer being directly obstinate, only the kind of obstinate that limits him to only fulfill the letter of the law of what God told him. Like, you want me to go to Nineveh and prophesy against them? Sure. There, I did it. Now, there are some textual issues with 40 days more. Some ancient texts say 3 days more, which honestly would fit into the story of Jonah better, as several things happen in 3-day increments here. Justin Martyr, an early Christian saint and martyr from Rome, said 43 days more, as if he took the 40 and the 3 and he added them together. The Hebrew Masoretic text has 40, but it's incredibly vague. The Hebrew text there could read at the end of 40 days or within 40 days. If you're a Ninevite, wouldn't you want to know the timing exactly? I also want to say that this prophecy has no action item. There's no do this or that will happen to you. There's no mention of God. There's no mention that these words come from God or that they are a prophecy at all. The last thing I want to point out in the first 4 verses of the 3rd chapter is the word overthrown, which is the exact same word that is used in Genesis to refer to Sodom and Gomorrah, and which quite obviously portends ultimate and thorough destruction. But not so fast. The word can also mean to turn around or change, to transform. So this prophecy could be reading, within 40 days, Nineveh will be transformed. Wow, that's totally different, right? A completely different meaning. And it just so happens to be the thing that actually occurs.